Ulrich of the Chipstone Foundation in Milwaukee, and I'm just back from maternity leave, and I'm quite happy to introduce my son Paul to my colleagues here, John Brown, the director of the foundation, and Claudia Mooney, assistant curator and new media manager. And we're also here today to discuss an object, a Singer sewing machine that currently resides in Laurel Ulrich's study. And it's an object that we've been trying to find a home for a long time. And I thought we might take some time today to talk about it to see if an object like this sewing machine could fit in Chipstone's collections. So first, maybe we could think a little bit about what we normally collect.
The foundation historically has collected early American furniture up to about 1825, 1830 or so. English pottery, 17th, 18th, early 19th century, terminating about the same date, and American historical prints and maps of the same era. So we tend to collect pre-industrial things.
But lately we've expanded our collecting. For example, we've started collecting Dave Drake jars, which were made by an enslaved potter in Edgefield, South Carolina. We've also collected face jugs, which were also made by enslaved people in South Carolina.
So these are objects that become really important, both touchstones and evidence for telling stories about the past.
Exactly.
For helping us understand the lives of people we might not understand but for those material things.
Exactly.
And where the sewing machine could fit into that is sort of fits into our interest in expanding the range of stories, the range of voices, the range of interpretive perspectives that can be brought. And obviously an artifact like this does relate to some of the things in our collection.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we could think first of all about, stylistically, about the decoration on this sewing machine.
So you have ornamental gilding in kind of a classicized style with an image of a sphinx.
Yeah.
And we have a broad range of objects, be it English-made ceramics or a really wonderful Philadelphia chair, for example, that has a very similar griffin, pair of griffins painted on it, done in the same applied gilding style.
Well, another sort of story we could think about with this object could relate to women who worked with it. We could think about this as a very gendered object.
Right, and Chipstone actually owns a Massachusetts circa 1800 sewing table, a work table, that you could relate to this object. It's an object with a bag at the bottom where you would put the needlework that you were working on. It's got drawers that you would pull out and a little writing surface that would come up. Yeah. And it was actually had locks, so it was one of the few pieces of furniture that was just meant for women, and that women could lock. They could keep whatever was their property inside, and it was just for them.
Yeah, and interesting you mentioned that it served all those multiple purposes, because the sewing machine would actually fold down, the hinges here would close, and you would have just a table. Similar to that much earlier sewing table.
Exactly.
Interesting. And in fact, if we did that, if we folded it and closed it in that way, it would look quite similar to a dressing table. It
would look close to a variety of early forms. So dressing tables, if one owned the table that went with this sewing machine, if you had the whole ensemble, that would give perhaps even more rationale for a place like Chipstone having it, because you could really say, well, it's the direct descendant of these tables that we have.
So we can think about this in this genealogy of furniture forms. In addition to thinking about the decoration, well, the decoration might tell us the form itself and the place it might serve in someone's home. Could also help us understand it a little more. Interesting. One concern that we might have in looking at an object like this is that it's not unique. Right? We're looking at a Singer Sphinx sewing machine. It's very specific, but that doesn't mean it's unique. There are countless examples of this object out there. In antique shops, in people's basements, maybe in some museum collection somewhere.
And on eBay.
And on eBay, exactly. And so as a museum that typically collects things that are very special and very unique, that's something that could pose a challenge for us. But we do have some factory-made things in here. Yeah,
and in fact, one could argue again that it's not really a challenge for us, because one of the stories that we do tell, the 18th century and certainly into the 19th century, is a period when that whole notion of handmade, handcrafting begins to get a little fuzzy because you began to have furniture shops, for example, with machinery, powered saws, water-powered saws, or steam-powered saws.
Right.
You began to have ceramics manufacturers making use of all kinds of modes of mass production,
Right.
whether you're talking cast ceramics, lathe or engine-turned ceramics, the application of transfer prints.
Right.
So many of the things in our collection, if not fully mass manufactured, were at least part of that evolution towards it.
So maybe it's a false dichotomy to say we have things that are handmade versus things that are factory made, because that's a long history and a long process that gets us from something that is totally made by one person in a shop to something that rolls off an assembly line. At Chipstone, we are also very interested in making, in the creation of artifacts. This is another way this machine could fit into our collection. As a tool for sewing, as a tool for making. My Tangible Things collaborator and friend, Sarah Schechner, was actually able to get this century-old sewing machine working. She uses to stitch the label onto the beautiful baby quilt she made for my son Paul. It reads, "For Paul, from Sarah Schechner, 2014. While we can talk about the decoration and form of this object, it truly comes to life when we think about what it is capable of creating and the stories those creations may tell." After considering all of the ways this sewing machine may link to the Chipstone collections, we decided that while we may not be able to get the exact sewing machine that sits in Laurel's office, we really needed to get our own. We are in the process of acquiring our very own Singer number 27. Who knows what kinds of history we may be able to craft with it.